What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? Well, it's another crossover with Locked on Padres host Javier Reyes to discuss Jock Peterson to the Texas Rangers and power rank the biggest loser franchises in Major League Baseball.
You are Locked on Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Without further ado, to discuss two new contenders in the American League and powering the biggest loser franchises in Major League Baseball, we got to do another crossover with Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres. Boop, boop, boop. How you doing today, sir? It's been so long since we've talked to each other.
Yeah, it's been so long. It's been an eternity. You know, this grueling, just harrowing offseason we've had. So it leaves a lot to discuss, I guess, man. But yeah, super excited again to talk about stuff. And you texted me this idea about talking about loser franchises, I believe, after the Josh Naylor trade, which I imagine you've talked about at your show. Obviously, everyone check that out. And I just died because, like, I knew I was like, oh, this is your specialty. You are a very good hater, but like in a you're a good polite hater. Because some haters, they just like, F you, this guy stinks, and then they mislead. You mislead a little bit, but it's like fun. So like when the Max Fried thing happens, or my favorite tweet you've ever had, the Madison Bumgarner tweet, which is still the funniest thing for not long-time listeners. What did you say? You were like, what did
it was
you,
like,
it was
I
like
predicted. Yeah, it's like I predicted 6 innings and like 6 earned runs out of. So I would have to look it up. I actually don't remember.
It was like I predicted 6 earned runs for Madison Bumgarner. He decided to go the extra mile and give up that in 1 inning or something.
Something like that.
Oh
Yeah,
my
I'd have to
God.
go back. Every now and then I have one loaded in the chamber. I'm like, I just gotta fire this off. This one's for Javi right here. Javi's gonna.
I'm gonna look for it while we talk. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's been so many moves with Cleveland's and the Miamis where I was like, we got to discuss some of these loser franchises in Major League Baseball, because I think I've seen so many times this offseason where it feels like teams are making moves to just make moves. It's like, let's acquire this player, but then trade away that guy. It's like, I don't even understand why some of these teams make moves. So definitely want to discuss that in segment 2 and 3. But before we get into that, I want to discuss a little bit about the free agency that we have seen. And there's like 2 teams in the American League that have been really heating up this offseason. I've really liked the moves that they're doing. The Texas Rangers and the Boston Red Sox. They've been very aggressive. The Red Sox are a team that I've talked about spending more, being more aggressive this offseason. The Rangers, of course, winning the World Series and then missing out. But both those teams, I think, have come into this offseason really aggressive so far. We saw the Rangers middle of the night swoop in, steal Jock Peterson. He was a fan favorite last year from the D-backs, was incredible. So far, Rangers have brought him in, traded for Jake Berger, re-signed Eovaldi. Look at the Red Sox, trade for Garrett Crochet. They brought back they signed Aroldis Chapman, which is, of course, a little controversial. But I love the 1-year prove-it deal for Walker Buehler. Patrick Sandoval, back-end rotation guy, solid. Like, I like what these 2 teams are doing. I just wanted to know your thoughts about. I thought the AL last year was so weird when we looked at the teams that made it. When we look at the Tigers, who got really high, and some of the other teams, like the Royals, were really good last year. Like, I thought it was such a weird AL team. And I wonder if we're going to get back to like more normal in terms of like big market teams being back in the American League next season.
We'll see. I mean, I think that this is almost has a little bit to do with what we're going to talk about later about loser franchises, which is like these type of moves that the Red Sox and Rangers made. Like, any team could do these type of moves. Like, we're not talking about the Juan Sotos or the Max Frieds or the eventually Corbin Burns, which very funny that he hasn't been signed yet, by the way. Like, those moves maybe aren't as sustainable for a lot of teams, but anyone can kind of do a Josh Naylor trade. You can probably do the Nate Eovaldi thing. You can do prove-it deals with Walker Buehler, right? Like, I think that's the type of spending that every team should be doing. Not necessarily the Sotos, but stuff like that. And it's just a shame that like teams who are arguably better off and had better seasons than the Rangers and the Red Sox, that they're the ones that aren't doing anything right now, right? Like that's, and I think that is just the way I like to kind of describe the problem with baseball. But all in all, I think that the moves are really fascinating. talked about some of them on my show on Monday.
Yeah.
Just like, for Padres fans, it's been a really quiet offseason, and it's seeming like the more and more time goes on, we're like, oh man, like when you read the tea leaves, there was an article by Kevin Acee that talked about this as New Tribune. That's like, yeah, we might be heading back to the Padres of old, although I think that it's going to be a little bit more in between, which isn't always bad, but it is such a killjoy when you were just throwing money every year, and now it's like it's a little bit of whiplash you get, I think, from that experience, from spending a lot of money to now just operating like I think all teams frankly should, but since they have all these big contracts, it's just a little bit weird. So we're still going to see how that pans out, but I like the moves. I really enjoyed like 7 moves happening while I was asleep. Shout out Jeff,
that's always nice.
And being awake. It's just really good stuff from them. And I don't know. I like them. I even like the Eloy Jimenez move for Tampa.
I love that minor league deal for a guy who like has raw talent, but just can never stay healthy. It's just been a disaster for him. But it's like, if he could just put it together just a little bit, like, there's talent there.
Not gonna lie, and I wrote about this for Just Baseball. Everybody go check it out. The Eloy Jimenez fan club, which I'm trying to get kickstarted. I will say, a little bit worrisome that it's a minor league deal. You know what I mean? That makes me feel like maybe teams know like this guy might be done. But still, 27 years old. We'll see how that pans out. Yeah, man. I just think that overall this offseason, we talked about this last week, has just been so sporadic and so frantic. Like there's just either whether it be trades or signings, it seems like we get one every other day. And I don't care if they're overpays. And frankly, as fans, you shouldn't really always either. I think it gets complicated there, but I just hope that my team gets into the fray at some point. And I think they will. There's still a lot of players left.
There's still so many guys unsigned. And for me, a lot of times when we're discussing this stuff, it's like, it's not just spending money, but it's also like how you spend the money. Like, I just feel like Red Sox spending 21 on Walker Buehler, who, yes, he has some risk when it comes to his health, but like we know what his ceiling is versus like the Angels spending. I like Kikuchi, but 22 for Kikuchi for a 3-year deal versus like a 1-year prove-it deal for Walker Buehler. Like, I think in a vacuum, I'd rather just give Buehler that money. So I just feel like some of the ways like the small market teams spend their money as well, I just don't feel like is that smart. Like sometimes they will spend just as much for one guy for player X that big market will spend for player X, but it's like the big market team actually just got the better player. You're overspending for guys who are not as good a lot of times in the minor league, and maybe that's just the nature of the beast at times there. But also the free agent first base market has been pretty hot recently as well, Javi, with Goldie going to the Yankees, of course, D-Bas getting Josh Naylor, and then we saw Christian Walker going to that evil empire. I'm just glad he's finally going to get some of his respect finally out here. But what did you make of like the incredible first base franchise?
I think if I was going full hipster, I'd be telling you that the Astros have had the best offseason. The reason I would say that is because you gave up basically, you trade Tucker. I understand that that's bad, but he was a free agent, and you got back Isaac Paredes. This is a good player. And instead, you get Paredes, and then you don't have to pay Bregman now. You bring in Christian Walker. I don't know. I just think that they're allocating their resources smartly. Speaking of smart spending, I like it, dude. And I think that I forgot how many years left of control Paredes has. So I don't know if it's like a giant advantage in that respect. I'm gonna check this out right now. Yeah, if I could find Isaac Paredes as I find
he won't be a free agent. Yeah, he won't be a free agent until 2028. So they got some time with him.
Like I think that the Cubs, and I respect it, but I think they're kind of like shooting for it and they're going for it. And I think it's always a little bit dangerous to be giving up players like a Paredes who has contract, stability and control when it's not for sure that you're good. Like the Cubs didn't make the playoffs this year. So I respect them pushing for it, but it would make me nervous being like, we're pushing a lot of our chips away. And it's not like we were in the NL, the NLCS last year. Like say the Padres. Padres, it would be fine if they gave up a player like that, right? Or at least it would be more understandable. But for the Cubs, I'm a little bit worried. I just don't know what that team is right now. They very well could be good next year, but I'd be a little bit worried. But at the very minimum, they did salary dump Cody Bellinger. So good for them.
Yeah, the question is, do you want to, I guess, pay Kyle Tucker after the season? Because, I mean,
he's probably going to be the biggest free agent. Yeah, he's going to be the biggest free agent probably.
he doesn't feel like he has the name value of like the Sotos or, those kind of guys. But you go look at the stats and it's like, I don't know. It like in a vacuum, is Soto that much better than Kyle Tucker? Like, I really don't know. Kyle Tucker's a near 1,000 OPS, like 30, 40.
He is, but I know what you mean.
Like I think it's a lot closer than and Tucker, I don't know what his defense is, but if he plays a little defense as well, I mean, that's a big game changer as well between those two guys. So I think honestly, pretty good deal for the Chicago Cubs, but it all depends on if you're going to pay him the big money after this offseason. But who knows? Maybe the Cubs are also in our little franchise loser power ranking, which we'll discuss here in segment number 2. And if you're looking to buy tickets to an upcoming sport or an event, then the best place to do that, of course, is going to be Gametime, because Gametime is the best place for last-minute deals on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They have this feature called all-in pricing. When you toggle this feature on, it shows you your total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You could get a panoramic view from your seat before you buy. They also have the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, back here on the Locked On Diamondbacks, the Locked On Padres crossover. Yes, that was a pre-recorded.
Yeah, I was going to say, oh, fancy. Okay, I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was great.
You're wondering, yes. I feel like it's just, I saw Sully do it, honestly. I did a crossover with him. Like, oh, man, he just has this thing pre-recorded, just hit play and everything. I was like, that might be the best thing to do going forward. Just have it nice and clean. So we might be doing that. But we brought you on today because I had this little topic that I pitched to you, which we'll discuss, we were discussing off air. Because after the Josh Naylor deal and also after the Jesus Luzardo deal, this is really what inspired me, because the Marlins were this team last year where they made the postseason. I felt like they had this young collection of like 7 arms in the rotation that I really liked. You had the Cy Young Award winner in Sandy. Felt like you had a growing lineup in Jazz and all these other guys. Maybe the offense needed some work for sure, but it felt like you had pieces and like you were moving in a direction. Then you fire your GM Kim, and then it's like all fell down from there. And now the Marlins feel like they're entering another rebuild after people are saying they're coming off a 5-year rebuild after another 5-year rebuild after that. Like, it's been 15 years of rebuilding for the Marlins. And that's like what inspired this topic, the loser franchise power rankings. And I want to start with the top, Javi. We're just going to go back and forth and discuss our biggest losers in the sport right now. I'm going to start actually because for me, my biggest loser right now is the team that I just discussed, the Miami Marlins. I thought they had the best GM executive last year in Kim. I thought she was the executive of the year last year with the deadline deals, with the getting the burger, Josh Bell, get that team to the postseason. You had this young rotation, and now you're trading off guys like Jesus Luzardo. You had the disaster year with your offseason and your offense. You let Jorge Soler go last year. Like, it was a terrible year for the Marlins. They feel rudderless again. It feels like they're about to tear this whole thing down and start all over, and that's like been their thing like the last 10 to 15 years after trading Stan and Yelich and Ozuna. Like, you have not been able to figure it out at all after trading some superstar talents from your franchise. I have not been able to figure it out at all. Had the 1 year of making it to the postseason, and that's about it. They are currently, and I know you could go by the records of last year, there are worse teams, but right now I'm putting the Marlins number 1 in my franchise power rankings, not for what they did this past year, but I'm going off like the last 10 to 15 years for them.
Totally understandable. I think that with the Marlins, I will push back only a tiny bit on the playoff appearance. I don't think they were that good. That just could be a me thing. I know Sandy was great, but it required so much. And my thing was like Luis Arias was like your best offensive player. If they were obscenely clutch that year, like the run differential was really bad. They just always showed up in the 9th inning. So it was a really fun season. And I do like those trades. And by the way, the trade for, just to give Kim Ng more credit, the trade for Jesus Luzardo, they gave up a half season of Starling Marte.
Yeah, that was
Jesus Luzardo. Like, that's crazy. Like, that was an amazing trade. And don't get me wrong, some were better than others, right? Like giving up Adam Duvall for like Alex Jackson, some like random like player. Like, they had some bad ones, although it was weird the way that she was like, I had to trade him. So that was maybe a sign of organizational dysfunction. The fact that she used that phrasing, I had to. That's very odd. It's like, what do you mean had to? So I think that team is just a mess on all sorts. Having a potential executive of the year and then losing that person, also losing your manager too. That just to me is like, oh, so now you guys care about the results? Now you're like, because then all the other years that they were bad, it took a while before those people got fired, right? So I just think that's a great call. And I think you can argue, and some people might be thinking, well, what about the A's? I think that the A's overall are still worse in some respects, and that's who I'm going to talk about next, obviously. But they've actually put together really competent teams before.
Yeah,
they have. With the exception of this brief period with the Marlins. And I love that you brought up, by the way, their pitching, because I remember when like pitching was all they had, and now it's like, what happened? Where'd it go? Yuri Perez, Max Meyer, like what's going on over there? I don't really get it. But with the A's, it's all ownership. That's the difference. I think that the Marlins has been ownership and a lot of people in positions that haven't done well. Now, I know that those two can go hand in hand a lot of times, but with the A's, it's like you can see they do really good stuff. They had that fire sale from a few years back, and it's because they had to have the fire sale. They had to. And I think that other teams, what makes baseball so cruel is that other teams know that you have to trade that player. So they're like, what are you going to do, dude? You have no leverage here. You have to trade Matt Olson to us, and we're going to give you what we give you, and that's it. And that's why they get screwed in these things like this. So I feel a little bit bad for some of these teams and the management making decisions. So that's why I don't always put it on them, but rather the ownership. I think that, but the A's in general, at least they've made the playoffs. At least they've made the playoffs in the past 15 years and genuinely been a decent contender, right? Like they've had really, I don't think the Marlins have raised like a good hitter on that team since Stanton and Yelich wasn't even great immediately when he was with them. So I would say the Marlins are number two just because, or I'm sorry, the A's are number two because they've at least been competent and good before. I know that they're gone. So there's a special third circle of hell or whatever, it's, I guess, type of region. Maybe they should go unranked in this. But yeah, man, I feel so bad for A's fans because imagine if you spent some money. All those years with Chat. I mean, I don't know about you. Didn't it feel like every other 3 years they'd have to rebuild? And then we're like, whoa, the A's. Where'd you find Matt Chapman? Where'd you find Josh Donaldson? Where did you find X and X? Where did you find Cespedes? And who's still good right now? What's his name? Sonny Gray. They find really good players all over the place, and then ownership just lets them down, and then they're unable to trade them for max value, and they're unable to keep them. So A's is still atrocious. But man, Marlins, man, there's some funny stories because Arm Layton, a good buddy of mine, will tell you some. Incredibly incompetent, that team. I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, I think the A's are kind of like the perfect case study for this kind of exercise because like you say, they're a team that's always in the postseason, always flirting with that, but it's like they're also the team that doesn't put any money back into the franchise. So it's like when you're the franchise known for look how good we can be without spending any money. It's like, do you actually want to be known for that? Like you have all these incredible seasons where it's like how we feel about the Brewers, where it's like, we know you're a good regular season team. We know you could put wins together, but once you actually get to the postseason, you actually have no shot of winning it. And so like the A's are kind of like the perfect case study for this kind of exercise because yes, on paper, there are definitely franchises over the last 15 years who have had worse seasons cumulatively, have more losses than the A's, but in terms of like a philosophy standpoint, the A's are like, let's just be good. Let's never be great. I think that's actually a real loser mentality. So I think they fit this exercise perfectly. I'll give one more before we head into a little break here, but this is NL West fan favorite of ours. This is just a team that's just always in the bottom of the rankings.
Oh no.
And sadly, they've had a manager who's been there for 20 years now, has only had 2 90-win seasons, never more than 90 wins, and maybe if I double check, one playoff win under his belt. That is Bud Black. That is the Colorado Rockies. That is Dick Monfort and that ownership paying Chris Bryant $100+ million for him to never play, do nothing for that franchise. You got rid of your all-star from a year ago in the middle of the season in Elias Diaz, I believe, for just no reason. You're like, let's just get rid of our all-star catcher for nothing. Brendan Rodgers was your top prospect for like 20 years, and now he's a free agent. He's going to leave. He's going to go nowhere. You got nothing out of that. Your rotation constantly is terrible. Yes, being in Rockies and Coors Field doesn't help, but it just feels like this franchise, there's actually some pieces I like with the Nolan Jones, who had a good rookie year, terrible sophomore season, got Toglia. Like, there are some dudes in the lineup that I do like, but it feels like, again, just one of those franchises that have no sense of direction. Their ownership, you trade away the Arenado is a terrible deal. Let Trevor Story walk for nothing, which actually probably worked out for the Colorado Rockies because the Red Sox definitely regret the Story signing. But they just have no sense of direction. They don't know what they want to do. They trade away franchise stars for nothing. They keep guys. They overpay players. They cut all stars off their roster in the middle of the season. They're just one of those rudderless teams that seem like they have no sense of direction. And they've been one of the worst run organizations for like 20 years now.
The only thing is that there's something lovable about the Rockies.
They are lovable.
You know what I mean? They're lovable losers. Like, the reason why is because
no one
I have
hates
many.
The Rockies. That's
No one hates them.
Yeah.
I think I have theories that it's just like they've ascended beyond us mortals and they've discovered it's not about winning or losing anymore. It's about the vibes, man.
They are fun.
They have a really diehard fan base and people still go to the games. They're like, oh, whatever, man. Yeah, I hope Bryant plays today, but let's just have fun, man. Let's go get a beer. Like,
they're all in Denver, just faded, mile high. They got the altitude sickness. Like, they don't know what's
like
going
I
on.
said, a higher plane of existence, man.
Yeah.
I mean, just I think that team, though, but you have to when you break it down, like total incompetence. This is a team that traded Nolan Arenado for basically nothing and then signed Chris Bryant later for basically more money in terms of over the remaining contract years, right? Like, that's like, what are you doing? Chris Bryant never plays for them. This is a team that had an awesome story in Daniel Bard, 37 years old.
Don't even talk about him. Free agent.
Yeah. All-star season, a 1.79 ERA, and it was legit a FIP of 2.86. And instead of trading him, like every other team would do, all-star closer at that age, because relievers are a little bit volatile year to year. So if one's hot right now, you trade for him, they go in the deadline, and then you re-signed him. Which is just like, what are you doing? Then he comes in the following year, he's terrible, and by the way, they're still paying him next year. Like, I don't. They really, truly do not know what's going on there. Dick Montfort's a horrible owner. The GM has been really bad too. The way that they've treated players and such, really bad. I just got so much love for that fan base because they're still there, man. You know what I mean? So, not quite as bad as A's and the Marlins, I think, but the thing that they're good at is at least cultivating some sort of vibe. You know what I mean? So there's got to be something that they're doing over there. Yeah. Maybe it's not the signings. Maybe it's the ballpark.
I think that's what it is. You just go there. You got the mountains in the backdrop, and like the offense is always going to be good. So like you're going to show up, and, like whether your team's winning or losing, you're going to have like a good night at the ballpark.
I think that's what it is. They're like, I might see like 6 home runs tonight. Like, why not? Let's go watch. And the tickets, So that's got to be part of it. But
branding, like the purple's clean. Like they got some clean unis. Like I think it's like the whole vibe aesthetic of the Rockies. Like
absolutely, man.
But looking at my list here, I actually had a team above the Rockies, and my loser franchise power rankings actually went out of order. So who is that team? We'll discuss in segment number 3.
The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up the W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's thrilling. My favorite thing to do on the FanDuel Sportsbook app is the same game parlay. When I see that Arizona Cardinals are playing, sometimes I like to do a little Cardinals money line. Give me a little James Conner over on rushing touchdowns, and give me Kyler Murray anytime touchdown. When that 3-leg hits, it brings a big smile to my face. So if you want a big smile on your face, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more at FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
All right, back here on the Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Padres crossover, discussing our biggest loser franchises in Major League Baseball. We've discussed the Marlins, we've discussed the Rockies, the A's, but I said there was actually a team that had above the Rockies. I just quickly neglected just now because a lot of times when we're discussing these loser teams, we discuss the teams because they don't spend enough money, right? We always say, oh my God, they've been 25th in payroll for 10 straight years. Well, this team is actually the opposite. Looking at the last 20 years, surprisingly, this team is like top 7 in payroll every single year, but you wouldn't know because they are consistently on the outside looking in of the postseason. I'm talking about the LA Angels. You've had Ohtani, you've had Mike Trout, the two best players of our generation. Not just them, you've also had Albert Pujols. You've had 3 of maybe the top 5 players of the last 25 years mixed in with CJ Wilsons and other Jared Weavers. Like, you've had all-star superstars roll through that franchise. You look at their payroll the last 20 years, Javi, I was surprised to see they've been consistently, the one time they've been outside the top 10 in payroll since 2003 was 2022. This is a top 7 payroll team every single year. They spend the money. I was shocked to see that when I was doing exercise for this little segment today. I'm like, oh my God, like I know Rendon and the Trouts are on such high salaries, but I didn't realize this was one of the highest spending teams the last 20 years, and they have nothing to show for it. You got the Ohtanis, the Trouts, the Pujolses, and it leads to no sort of result, no sort of promised land in the end. So that's why I actually have them number 2 in my personal list. It goes Marlins, Angels, Rockies is my top 3 right now, my loser franchise rankings.
I mean, here's how I break it down. First of all, Jerry Reinsdorf, low-key one of the worst owners in all of sports. This is a guy who was instrumental in not preventing the Michael Jordan Bulls from falling apart despite coming off a freaking championship. This is a guy who owns 2 teams that are very bad in the White Sox and the Bulls. White Sox we might talk about very briefly, but White Sox are boring to talk about. They're just bad. You know what I mean? They're just like atrocious. And I actually think some of it was on the GM, like just did not do well with their scouts and their prospects. It just wasn't as good as I thought. But man, when I tell you this team, when I tell you that this team is incompetent, I mean, this is a team that the fan base was about to have a parade because their owner originally was reported to be looking to sell the team. And then it was like, just kidding. And then it stayed. Like, I feel so bad. This is a team that, I mean, and I think it's on ownership. That's like, they should have traded Trout and Ohtani in like 2022. Yeah. They would have gotten a ton of prospects in return. They can still go out and spend some money after that. And instead they make dumb trades for Lucas Giolito, who ends up getting blown up, and they give up good prospects. They lose Brandon Marsh for no reason, who, not saying he's a superstar, but a quality player. But I think most of all, I mean, dude, you could argue they could be like number 2, only because it's like you successfully wasted one of the 10 best players probably of the last at least 60 years in Mike Trout.
Maybe of like any sport too, like
any
maybe
sport
like a top
too.
5 like athlete that we've seen dominate.
And if Ohtani was there for longer, that would have been 2 that you wasted. Thankfully, I mean, unfortunately that he went to the Dodgers, right, for our sake, but at least he got out. You know, so that's why I can't like fault the Dodgers that much for that one. It's boring, but I'm like, at least we get to see him in the postseason. Yeah. Like, that's objectively a better outcome than him just staying on the Angels. It is. Yeah, I would prefer a different team, but it's a better outcome. So yeah, man. I mean, loser engine, and you're right. Yeah, I understand that Pujols wasn't in his prime when he was there. I get that. But it's just, even when they spend money, they unfortunately get used sometimes against me as the example of, see, it's not just about spending money, man. Look at the Angels.
They probably are that example, to be honest.
They probably are. Like, you pull up the encyclopedia, that's the example. So I agree with you, man.
Oh yeah, anytime they spend money, it feels like it's just been a complete disaster. Then they spend the money on Josh Hamilton too. Like, they've always been like, let me spend $25 million on this like aging star. Yeah,
they do this, and then they don't have the farm system and the talent development to give them the other pieces that will make the team a lot better. I mean, Mike Trout alone gets you to like 70 wins alone. That's like, I know that sounds like not great, but trust me, that's insane for baseball. So if you just gave him some decent players, if you did what the heck, if you had a Marlins miracle season, they've only made the playoffs once with Mike Trout. So I mean, they're an insult to other baseball fans, while the other teams are an insult to their fan base, I think. I think that the Angels successfully destroyed who should have been this ultimate. I don't care about the personality stuff. It's not his fault. Who cares? If he was with a team that was competent in the playoffs, we would hear more about this. And I feel bad, so that stinks. And I agree. And I have no idea what they're ever going to do because this team just seems hell-bent, as evidenced by the Yusei Kikuchi signing, to just stay at 70 wins. You know? We're just going to stay there like an NBA team that's just like hell-bent on always being the 8th seed and getting wiped out in the first round. That's what the Angels feel like.
And then we're running out of time here, but want to give a quick couple of honorable mentions. The Pirates, I wanted to give a quick honorable mention to, because of course they are historically bad. They really made the playoffs like only 3 times in like the last 15 years. Really bad stuff for them. The White Sox, they are just in a terrible spot right now. But historically, I actually don't feel that bad about the White Sox. It's just been a disaster like the last 2 or 3 years. And then really the team that I want to discuss, I probably won't have enough time today, but the Seattle Mariners, a team that had that longest drought in sports history, all of a sudden built a good team, but now it still feels like they're a franchise where they feel super hesitant. It feels like they don't want to add at all to that lineup. Like they're afraid to spend money. They're afraid to trade away any other rotation starters. And it feels like they're not very serious about being a real contender. It feels like they were just happy and content when making the postseason, and they don't really want anything more than that. So I'm going to put the Mariners on this list too. Yes, you have Julio Rodriguez and you have an elite rotation. You've done a great job in terms of player development, but it does not seem like they want to do anything in terms of spending actual resources on that roster. So they kind of got that Oakland A's mentality right now. So loser stuff by the Seattle Mariners.
I agree. I will say ownership has hurt them a bit. And they have at least procured some more talent. They've had some successful years. They've made the playoffs. Recently. So I got to give them credit for that. I don't understand their strategy of like, let's just hope Julio Rodriguez is a 7-win player. It's just like, that's literally what they're hoping for on offense every single year. And they just haven't figured some things out. In terms of the history of the sport, they're one of the great loser organizations in a fun way. Everyone go check out Secret Base's History of the Mariners. Amazing documentary. One of the best baseball movies ever made. So I'm with you on that. And I'll close out with 2 teams that I think are the exact same. I think they are the preeminent examples of, wow, I wish you guys just spent. Arguably 3 examples, but I'd say they're 2 of the same teams, some Milwaukee Brewers and the Cleveland Guardians. 2 teams. And the reason I compare them, especially, they are 2 teams in divisions that are extraordinarily winnable. You don't have to deal with the Yankees. In fact, one of the best teams of the past few years in the Central has been the White Sox when they were good for those few years. And they never spent. Andrew Benintendi for 6 years, 75 is literally like the biggest contract they've ever handed out. Or 5 years, 75. I forgot what it was.
Which is insane to think about.
Yeah, I know. That's insane to think about. So the Guardians, what did they do after making the World Series? Just slowly got worse, right? Eventually lost Kluber, Lindor. They kept Jose Ramirez, congratulations to them, although he wasn't on that World Series team. Just slowly, they just got worse. This is the problem with baseball. Imagine if the Celtics were in the finals and traded Jaylen Brown in the offseason. You know what I'm saying? That's basically what the Cleveland Guardians are. Milwaukee Brewers, same thing, arguably even worse, with their extremely winnable division. Yes, I give them credit for at least keeping Christian Yelich, but this is a team that never goes out and does the big thing. It just feels like they kick the can down the road. It's a reflection on ownership, don't get me wrong. But in a lot of ways, it's just, guys, historically speaking, you're not going to win if you're not spending on stars. That's just not how the sport works. And I think that the Brewers, very, very good front office. I think they do make great moves. They clearly have an eye for talent over there. Willie Thomas got paid how much money? Like $180 million. They traded nothing to get him from Tampa. They knew this guy had something, and he was great there for a while. It just stinks that they never go out and make some moves that'll make them better. It stinks because they are really, really well run. Same thing goes for Cleveland, but it just feels like they kick the can down the road every year in very winnable divisions, especially for Milwaukee right now, right? Like at least the Twins have been all right some years, right? The Guardians, I'm sorry, the Tigers were good this year. The Royals were good. Cardinals aren't doing anything. Cubs haven't done anything. Pirates are useless. Reds are close to useless, and they just stay there. And it must be maddening. That's an ownership group that fought over $740,000 for their Cy Young winning pitcher. They went to arbitration over that. $740,000. Really, guys? Really? Amazing.
Like, I'm not convinced the Brewers want to win games. Like, you look at every move they make, it's like, let's get rid of Hader, let's get rid of Corbin Burns. Like they get rid of all their best players, and somehow they still always end up with 90
front
wins.
office, man.
Yeah,
they know how to develop stuff.
Yeah, and I don't. Craig Counsell, like he
Mhm.
was considered the best manager, and it's like he's gone too. So it's
Although I will say, paying that much by the Cubs for a manager was a little bit weird. I was like, I don't know about that, folks. I mean, good for Craig
everyone,
Counsell.
yeah, but it
I
was like
totally understand why he left, but it was a
they
little bit
talked
weird.
about him like he was like the Mike Trout of managers. Then it's like, oh,
Yeah.
nothing actually changed with the Brewers at all with Counsell leaving. So it's like, okay.
It's like when the Pistons in basketball paid Monty Williams like all that money, and it's like,
Oof.
I feel like you guys have some other problems. I think you should figure out the other things before you pay a coach.
Yeah,
And then it was a disaster. So
That was a fleece by Monty. Good job by him. To keep it down.
Fleece.
Fleece.
Our guy, keep getting them checks, my guy.
I don't know how he did that. But yeah, that's going to wrap up our Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Padres crossover, discussing two new teams in the contention for the World Series in the American League, maybe in the Rangers and Red Sox, and also discussing the biggest losers in Major League Baseball with Javier. Javi, where can the listeners find you online?
You can find me, my jolly good friends, over at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, on Twitter /X or Blue Sky. And you can also just check out Just Baseball. I've been writing over there. Recently wrote about Jerks and Profar. I think by the time this is up, you guys will see that. A bunch of other things, and I work on the newsletter. If you want to just get the immediate details of all the signs that come in, go subscribe to that. It's been a lot of fun working on that. And otherwise, stay golden. This is, for me at least, coming out on Christmas. So to all who celebrate, a Merry Christmas to you. Go Wemby, go Knicks. Very excited about that. And the Lakers and Warriors be on national TV on Christmas Day is a crime against humanity. But other than that, hope you guys enjoy the rest of the holiday season as well.
Yeah, follow me wherever you stream podcasts on all platforms, at CreatorThomas24 on Twitter, or Locked On Diamondbacks, both Twitter and Instagram for the podcast handle. And please, please, please hit subscribe to both Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Padres on YouTube. Until next time, everyone, enjoy the holidays, enjoy your Christmas, and hopefully the D-backs and Padres get some good gifts this holiday season. Until next time, Javi,